We have another series of interviews here by Portland Transport. For those of you who don't know the history of me and Portland Transport, about 8 months ago I got banned for life after being a regular commentator for 6 or so years. Bob Bridgerton decided to throw me out for life because he's a goddamn Nazi, that's why. The fact that I brought to his attention that he's a Nazi didn't sit well with him. So they threw me out of there. And, it's okay. It's no big deal. It's a pretty boring blog without me around. I mean, I did spark it up a lot, but they don't appreciate me. It's okay. They need to have their pro-rail blog without the influence of somebody like me. I understand. I don't hate you guys for it. Anyway, they did one of their bullshit interviews with Neil, so we'll get to watch this together. This would be the first time I'm watching it too, but we'll watch it together, and I'll cut in as appropriate.
Well, good afternoon. We're here with TriMet General Manager Neil Mcfarlane.
We'll cut in here immediately to point out the backdrop for the interview. And as you know, every single public thing that TriMet does is very carefully scripted to have the greatest propaganda effect. And as you see, they have their lovely little bridge in the background so as to influence public opinion. People looking at the bridge and going, oh, isn't that pretty? Look at that lovely bridge that TriMet's doing. Of course, the fact that the bridge is going to serve a huge minority of citizens is never brought up. I think it's going to be the rail and the bicycles and the pedestrians. I think 12% of the total Portland people get to use it. But look at how nice it looks. It's just like the tram. They put that $70 million thing in there. Has no purpose to Portland citizens. But it looks nice, right? In Portland, it's all about tourist guides. They want everything to look good. They're trying to get people to visit here. You know, it's cool, right? Portland's so cool. Anyway, I thought we should bring up how essential it is for TriMet to have the propaganda value of every single thing they do.
For, I think, the 5th Portland Transport conversation with Neil. Neil, we appreciate you being here today.
Well, it's always a pleasure.
So we have to start out talking about our backdrop here. We are very grateful to the Portland Opera for hosting us today, where I'm told the building is literally 4 feet from the edge of the bridge. So why don't we start by talking about how the bridge is going?
The bridge is going great, and actually I can say from first-hand experience, I was out there yesterday afternoon, happened to be in the middle of a thunderstorm, but nonetheless I was out there, and I can tell you that we're literally 3 sections away from the bridge being complete in the middle, and those sections are each 16 feet each. So.
Hallelujah, hallelujah. They're 3 sections away from having the bridge completed in the middle. Oh my God, it's so exciting. It's unbelievable.
You can begin to do the math. It's not very far from completion. We had a milestone this week too, which is the bridge is actually connected to this side of the river firmly and formally with a concrete pour. So now the bridge is actually anchored on both sides of the Willamette River. Overall, the bridge is about 75 in that range complete. It looks like, and that's what really remains to be done is, of course, the civil work, things like handrails, the barriers that will protect pedestrians from the buses, the rail, light rail, and the streetcar that will use the center tracks. And it's actually going very well. It's right on schedule. So actually the bridge as an entity will be completed later this summer. We expect that center pour to be complete really around first half of May or so this year. So we're really excited to see it move as quickly as it is and come up out of the ground. A lot of people don't realize that about half the concrete that goes into bridge goes under the ground, and so it's really quite exciting to see the second half of the concrete create. I think it's going to be a really important forum for the city and an important piece of infrastructure for the city for a long time.
Great. Well, one of the questions we've gotten from our readers is whether, in fact, because the bridge is so far along, if you will open it up to bikes and pedestrians before transit operations start.
I think the answer is probably no, unfortunately. But let me tell you why. There's actually some really good reasons, which is that as we go through the actual completion of the civil bridge itself, then we turn it over to contractors who install our overhead electrification, our communications, or what we call our systems contractors. So there's a period of time. And then we come back and do some very elaborate safety certification and testing along the way. So those are all increments of time. The next thing up, though, and actually this is the busy part of calendar 15, the first half of calendar 15, is we actually have to train every bus operator, every rail operator, every streetcar operator, not only with classroom time, but with actual time on a vehicle on the bridge going across the bridge. So we're shoehorning.
What the heck does he have to do that for? I mean, isn't it like driving over every other bridge or every other street? And I mean, the signals are the same, all the stuff is the same, but he wants to put people in the classroom to drive over the bridge. I don't know. What do I know, right? Safety first, TriMet.
All of that in before the scheduled opening on September 12th, 2015. So right now it doesn't look like there's an opportunity to do much very early. But we'll keep looking for the opportunities. I know a lot of people I talk to say, you know, I remember being out on the Glenn Jackson Bridge when it opened, and you know, to actually have humans walk on bridges before they're turned over to the vehicles that use them every day is a pretty important thing.
Be a great thing for bridge pedal.
Yeah, exactly. It would be, no question.
So, leapfrogging from the bridge to the Portland-Milwaukee project, probably the number one question that our readers keep asking is, how will that actually be operated in terms of where the northern terminus is for service? Will it be interlined with the yellow line? Is that planning coming along? Can you share any more?
So in terms of the rail operations plan, it is coming along. The reason that there is something called an orange line instead of the yellow line, which I think started all that confusion, is that there is an unequal demand. We actually believe that passenger demand on the Milwaukee half of the line will be higher than it is on the interstate part of the line. So over time, what we expect is that we'll need to turn some trains around during the peak hours when we're serving the peak hour demand at Union Station. Day-based trains and most of the trains will continue through to interstate. They'll actually change their sign from orange to yellow when they get to PSU, and so they will be through routed.
Oh yeah, change its sign to yellow, or maybe green, or maybe blue, or maybe red. We all know that TriMet signs on MAX trains are quite often wrong. So I'm sure we'll get much more excitement on the scanner when they open this line. Scanner people like myself are always excited over something like this because, you know, our TriMet's already a bonanza of snafus and crazy shit. Although I'm starting to get a little bored with it because it's all the same stuff over and over again at this point. And I mean, it's just tons and tons of incidents that you never hear about anywhere. And when they open up the new line, that's going to be a whole nother bag of tricks for us to listen to and make fun of and etc.
For the most part. And the only exception will be a few of those trains that are in the peak hour that are needed on the south end that are needed on the north end.
And will there be a way for somebody getting on in, say, Milwaukee to know if they're on a train that's going through to North Portland or if it's a train that is going to turn around at Union Station?
Yes, we'll make sure that the schedules denote which ones, and we'll try to augment that with actual announcements as well.
Okay. All right. Well, the next question is about the project that isn't anymore, the Columbia River Crossing.
Yep.
And of course, there are people who are fans of the project. There are the camp that I'm in, which didn't like this particular design and thought it was too auto-oriented. But part of the project would have gotten light rail to Vancouver, which I think is a goal that most of our readers are in alignment with. So,
being the pro-light rail rah shish boom bah blog for Portland, yeah, he's probably right about that. Of course, the Portland Transport readers and the people of Portland are not the people of Vancouver and Washington State. There was really a lot of resistance to the light rail into Vancouver, and they could have had the CRC, but Oregonian officials insisted on light rail and no bridge, so they got no bridge, which fucks everybody. And so congratulations, Oregon, for being a bunch of dicks, because now you fucked everybody with your intransigence. Of course, you know, in this city, the church of light rail is everything. Everything, all the money that gets funneled to the so-called Goldschmidt crowd comes through the rail projects. This is the scam of Portland light rail, streetcar. There's this social group of people there, for lack of a better, well, they are actually the Goldschmidt people. It started with him, and this is how they've been funneling money to themselves since it started, is the rail projects. That's why they're so attached to these.
With this project now officially shutting down, you know, the common sense alternative, which was the configuration that I and some others had proposed, would say, let's get there in steps. And the first step would be to get light rail to Hayden Island. Does TriMet have any beginnings of ideas along that line, or you know, how are you regrouping in light of the shutdown of the project?
Well, so first of all, remember our position in that project, which is, you know, we were a partner agency, but we were not a lead agency.
You were the conduit for $850 million.
We were in the last...
That's correct. That's where TriMet gets its power. The money. That's why TriMet has so much influence and power in this area. The money that goes through there is incredible. And Chris is right. They're the conduit for the money. It's big money. And people want that money all down the food chain here. But once again, what do you mean light rail to Hayden? I haven't heard anything about that. Of course, I don't really look at Portland Transport much anymore. I just skim it now and then. I didn't hear anything about, what do you mean light rail? Fuck your light rail already.
In the last configuration. Here's what I'd say about it. I think it's a little soon to define the next steps from our standpoint. I don't have any magic plan. I don't think anybody else does. I think one thing that I would have a conclusion of is that that's still a substandard bridge for an interstate highway with the lift span and, frankly, with seismic concerns that I think don't deserve to be on a major interstate between, you know, Canada and Mexico. So I think that's still a problem that's there that we've got to address. And related to the transit elements, I think there is great agreement that the need in that corridor is a multimodal need, and that we've got to serve it with strong transit connections. Now, I would tell you, and I think you know this about me, I'm pretty ecumenical when it comes to transit mode. I love buses, trains, and, you know, any sort of transit.
You lying piece of shit, Neil. You know you love light rail. You don't love buses. There's no money in it for you to buy buses. He likes capital projects. Neil Mcfarlane likes capital projects because he can hire all of his buddy engineers. And that's what Neil loves. He says he loves buses. He doesn't love. He only loves buses if it involves a capital project like BRT. That would be okay with him because that would involve a capital project.
So I think, you know, when I think about any kind of resurgence of the project, we still got a substandard bridge, and we still have to serve that corridor with really great transit. I don't know, I don't have a notion, and TriMet's not really doing any work right now on how to resurface that. And my thought is that really one of the bigger, the issue that I think, if you will, derailed this in the state legislature was the lack of involvement from the state of Washington. Mm-hmm. So I think locally we need to see some involvement from the state of Washington before it, if you will, resurfaces.
Well, that's actually takes some of our questions out of order, because I think that touches on an issue that we're seeing. There were certainly state senators in Washington who objected to the transit component in funding the bridge package as a whole. You know, we've just seen a ballot measure in Tigard that puts limitations on high-capacity transit. Clackamas County passed a ballot measure last year that, well, didn't have a lot of effect on the current project. States a pretty clear preference. So are we seeing a trend that particularly suburban jurisdictions are looking at high-capacity transit more skeptically, and what does that say about opportunities to advance a Columbia River project or, you know, any HCT projects that are going to go into the suburbs?
Well, it's an interesting question, and I can't tell you that I have any great wisdom about answering it. I would just make a few observations about it. One is that when we go down, for example, and talk to community members in the Southwest Corridor, Tigard, Tualatin, Sherwood, there is a great demand there for more transit. But to a very large extent, some of what the neighbors are and our customers are talking about is better local connections within their own communities, as well as if you will, the trunk line into Portland.
Wow, did you hear that? He actually understands the problem there. That's exactly what people want. Now, we already know about Neil, okay? What he says and what he does are not the same. He's an expert at this. These people are experts at saying all the right things, but then not doing any of it. Apparently, he does seem to understand the issue, or he's at least saying he does, but will his actions be followed? I mean, will his words be followed with actions? That's a whole other story.
So one of my objectives is to prove to those communities that we have that we can be responsive to those desires and needs. And I know we're going to talk about service enhancement plans as we get going, but that's the mechanism I think we use for that. I think we also sometimes think about the current situation and say, gosh, isn't it awful? But these projects have always been hard. Somebody pulled out not long ago a Southeast Corridor study, part of a planning document that, believe it or not, had my name on it, and it was dated, I think, from 1981. So these things take a long time, and we've had a lot of false starts, for example, on the project that's under construction behind us. So I don't say there's no hope. I say that sometimes it just takes longer. The other observation I have is that transit in central Portland is a very ubiquitous, important service, and frankly, our service is thinner when you get out to the suburbs, and our market share is somewhat less. So I think there's an extra burden of sort of.
And he's right again. I mean, he's making sense in this interview. TriMet really is a Portland transit company. If you really want good transit, you have to be in Portland. I live in Northwest Portland. Who am I to complain? I mean, it's great service here, as long as you don't take it at night. Okay, it's after 10 p.m. it gets sketchy, which is kind of like a small town. But basically speaking, during business hours, you have plenty of transit in Portland. The city of Portland, especially this downtown area, is flooded with transit. When they talk about TriMet being this great transit agency, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about this central part of Portland, which really is an excellent. You have every kind of transit available here, really. They don't. When people talk of TriMet, they're not thinking of Beaverton and Aloha and Hillsborough. They're thinking of Portland.
Proving the value of transit in some communities where it's not quite as obvious as it might be in central Portland.
Okay. Let's focus on Southwest Corridor a little bit. So the City of Tigard has passed a ballot measure that, as I understand it, says that they are opposed to high-capacity transit until and unless there's a vote of the electorate there to approve a project. So what does that mean for planning? Obviously, City of Tigard can't constrain TriMet or metros, so I assume the steering committee is still chugging along, but what does it say about the participation of the mayor of Tigard on that steering committee? What's the impact on the project and how it's going to progress?
So I think it's a little soon to have a really very specific roadmap in response to that. But one thing that I would say is that this is a long-term study, and it was identified as the next priority regional corridor in the Metro's high-capacity transit plan. We looked at the whole region and the various competing corridors. This came out very clearly on top. And so there is still a great deal of, I think, interest in the region about this corridor. And I think it's important. It's I-5 South, after all. It's the major connection within Oregon, and we need better and improved high-capacity transit in the corridor. To me, is long-term is absolutely clear. Mode, alignment, and how, all subject to the study. The second thing I'd note about this is that this is still under Metro's lead, and so we do follow the lead of our regional planning agency, and TriMet at this point in time is a participating agency that helps develop alternative transit alignments and networks that help progress the evaluation along. Right now, we're still in an early stage of all of that work, and current plan is to progress that to at least the next decision point. But I do think that before we, as a region, decide to invest a great deal of money in a DEIS effort, for example, draft environmental impact statement effort, we need to have some clarity from the Tigard City Council, and I think they would want that themselves. So I think we progress a bit and then really try to get some clarity from the Tigard community. You know, you and I go back enough that we might remember one of the demises of a South-North ballot measure. And I remember after that, one of the Metro councilors at the time, a fellow by the name of Ed Washington, conducted a whole series of what he called listening posts around the region. And the question he was asking is, what message are you sending us with this? And sometimes those messages aren't really clear in a quick yes/no vote in an electorate. And as you well know, that Tigard vote was pretty even split, pretty close to 50-50. So that's a fair question. What did you really mean by your vote? And I think that...
What did you mean by your vote? They meant that they didn't want it. It passed. It doesn't matter whether it was just by one vote. It passed. See, that's the beauty of these kind of deals with these people. They're always looking for loopholes in what's the obvious. The obvious is it did not... Tigard was against the light rail coming into Tigard. And so there's no question about what they meant. And it doesn't matter whether it was by one vote or 1,000 or 1 million votes. The democracy is winner take all. And in this case, the winner was no on light rail, no on high capacity. And I continue to maintain that high capacity transit is a nice idea, but truly frequent bus service can achieve almost the same goal without all of this capital projects. I mean, if they were running a bus an articulated bus for every 5 minutes down Barber Boulevard, think of all the cars that would be off the road if people started taking it. If it was comfortable, if it was clean, if it had like an amenity like Wi-Fi, people would take it, and they wouldn't be bothered by getting stuck in traffic jams if they had a few amenities. But the way transit is now, where it's pack 'em in as many as you can, people aren't going to ride it, because I think the biggest barrier to people using transit is yielding your personal space and comfort. And the transit planners don't get that, because they don't understand what they're dealing with here. They're only looking at how many people can we pack in, how fast can we move them, but they're not understanding the psychology. I know the psychology of transit riders, because I've used transit and I've driven transit. People don't want to surrender their personal space. And the biggest problem with transit in this country is that you surrender your personal space. You're on an uncomfortable vehicle, packed in with a bunch of people you don't even want to know. And that's why people don't use it. Until they can beat that problem, people are not going to use transit. I mean, they came out with a study. Transit ridership has increased dramatically. It turned out that study didn't take into consideration the growth in the general population. When you look at the growth of the general population and the growth of transit ridership, you find out that transit ridership has actually declined. It has not risen. Transit ridership is flat, and people that are using transit are the ones that are forced to use it. Most of it's in New York, because you can't take a car into New York City. People here in Portland, the only reason they're riding Max is because you can't find a place to park in downtown. Everybody else is basically transit dependent.
The Tigard City Council will be querying their citizens about that over the next few months.
I think I remember testifying at one of those listening posts.
I'm sure you probably did.
So you mentioned mode and alignment for Southwest Corridor. As I understand, the steering committee is about to throw out some options and narrow the range of consideration. I understand a tunnel past Hillsdale is probably going to be off the table, but tunneling to serve OHSU is still on the table. Is that correct?
I think there is, and I'm not 100% up to speed on this, but my understanding is that there still is a thought about, is there a tunnel that diverts from one of the other surface alignments that can serve OHSU directly via an elevator. The other thing that we're looking at is other ways to serve OHSU. So, for example, one of the, when you're in these stages, I really like the fact that you get to have some wild and crazy ideas occasionally, but there are notions of other kinds of connections, say between Barber and OHSU, which, in space are only 800 feet apart. So there may be some other ways that we'll look at as well, in addition to the tunnel, that we'll be able to evaluate at this early stage. But obviously, OHSU employs up on the hill, what, 19,000 people, so it's as well as the important health services they provide, so it's an important connection in the corridor.
Yeah, I don't think our audience can see it on camera, but the tram is, at least in my view here. I understand that that serving OHSU via the South Waterfront light rail is kind of off the table because the tram doesn't have enough capacity at rush hour to get all those people up there.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
And he makes a good point, and that's an example of very poor planning, that they would have this tram and and there's no way for people coming from Milwaukee to use it to get up there. It's bad planning. I mean, they're supposed to be planning these things 20 years ahead. Well, we all know that the tram was a tourist thing. You know, it's not a serious transit vehicle. It's the doctors use it. They park down there. It's transit for the rich and famous. It's not real transit.
Reference the Metro High Capacity Transit Plan, and the second line in that priority list is Powell Division.
Right.
And Metro has just started up formal planning for that, and it's beginning some citizen outreach. It seems to be on a very fast track, and I think some of us wonder, given that it looks like Southwest Corridor is going to continue in sort of the more traditional planning process, which I won't call plotting, but we take our time to do it right. I wonder if Powell Division isn't actually being maybe positioned to leapfrog Southwest Corridor and get something perhaps a little bit simpler done first.
Well, I don't. First of all, I think it is intended to be a relatively quick decision process, and it is still a very early stage. I think the steering committee has sort of met officially once, informally twice, if you include an informal reception twice. So it really is just beginning the effort. It is a different kind of corridor, though, and I don't think anybody really thinks that this is really feasible to do a real heavy sort of infrastructure light rail project in that corridor. So then that leaves you with other kinds of alternatives that have an efficient use of the current rights-of-way available, and that's, there are both rail and bus versions of that. So the hope is that we can get to some decisions on that relatively quickly, and then perhaps move that into whether it's the whole sort of federal new starts process. It may be you can size that for the small starts program, which allows us to sort of advance it independently of any other priorities within the region. And we've done that a number of times, and where we've done streetcar extensions, and we've used, for example, the streetcar that serves the district we're in right now was a federal project that was going on about the same time we were advancing the Portland-Milwaukee project. So we can do smaller projects and big projects at the same time without throwing one or another off the schedule. And I think that's the vision that I see for this opportunity, but it's really early, and so we have to be really open to the community and the needs and expectations that are, and opportunities that we find in that corridor. I would tell you that Powell Division corridor to me is really exciting in a lot of different ways. One is that it connects so many really important educational institutions. So if you start with Portland State, Oregon Health Science University, this OMSI district, including the PCC Climb Center that's here, you follow that out to the 82nd and Division campus of Portland Community College, and then out further to Mount Hood Community College, and you begin to see some really key connections being made in the region.
That's a rather interesting perception there. I don't see any of those so-called college campuses as being anything major. I mean, there's no major purpose to have those connected, really. I mean, they're nice little community colleges, but do they need a high-capacity transit line to go to them? Hell no. It's like the Clackamas Town Center. Does that need a light rail to go to it? Hell no.
So I think there's some really exciting things that can happen with that. And I'm sorry, I know I'm meandering, but one of the things that we have found over the last few years is a great collaboration with all of our educational institutions, but particularly with PCC. and recently met with Dr. Brown, and he sort of explained one of the reasons why they think public transit is so important. Not only serving, we often have the same clientele, but it's also really important to be able to allow them to centralize programs to offer more capacity in one location than they could if they could spread them out. And that means travel between those campuses become even more important.
Well, putting on my Portland Planning Commissioner hat, it also serves some very dense neighborhoods.
Yes.
It serves, potentially, depending on where you make the crossover from Powell to Division, the Jade District, which is a neighborhood prosperity area that the city is focusing on. And there are definitely some streetscapes that need a lot of improvement along that corridor, so potentially a lot of opportunities.
And the great connection there at this end is that the transitway, whatever it is, could avail itself of the Portland-Milwaukee Bridge and the, if you will, expressway that we'll have for all modes up to NATO and Lincoln. So again, already there's a good section of the alignment which would normally be a pretty congested segment for any transit vehicle to move through that will offer exclusive right-of-way. So that's a great head start.
So the way you talked about Powell Division reflects kind of a duality that I'm seeing in the community discussion. Metro still very much talks about it as a high-capacity transit project with a mode to be determined. They think light rail is still in the envelope. When I hear TriMet people talk about it, it is most often as a BRT project. Can you reflect on sort of those two different messagings that we seem to be hearing?
Well, and Metro's right. This is early. We're going to learn a lot. We haven't eliminated any mode or any alignment, particularly within the corridor. So that's actually the proper place to be. I think you get from TriMet people sort of jumping ahead a little bit, saying what's really practical, and looking at what it takes to build a light rail alignment takes space that just doesn't seem readily available in a number of areas in the Powell Division corridor. So that's a challenge, but that's again a trade-off that we can look at with the community, and that's what this process is all about.
Yeah, bus rapid transit is a continuum. I mean, you can sort of put as much into it as you want to, and you could probably get as expensive on the high end as you are with light rail. Do you have a sense of where this corridor might fall on that spectrum?
I don't. And I think that will reflect a lot of the community input that we'll get as we go through this process. One of the things that I bring to the table, though, is the bias of not always doing the easy things. Sometimes we have to do some hard things to make sure that vehicles transit vehicles have the ability to get through some of the heavily congested areas in the corridor. And that's I think is going to be the challenge. Is certainly you can put bus rapid transit or streetcar or other things into the normal lanes of traffic. And in many areas that will be just fine, but there are some areas that are knots of traffic, as we well know, and we've got to sort of make sure that we figure out how to make sure our service is efficient through those areas as well, so that our customers have really good service.
Okay, that's the end of part one. Not a bad interview. Neil's fairly reasonable. As I've said many times, I don't think Neil Mcfarlane is as evil as I paint him to be. I think he is a careerist, and he had this opportunity to be the director, and he took it, and now he has to be known as the general manager who destroyed his union employee. And he, make no mistake, Mr. Mcfarlane is destroying his retirees. I mean, it's serious shit he's pulling on his retirees. And the fact that he chose to be a general manager knowing full well that he was going to be destroying people's lives makes him culpable for his sins. I mean, he's profiting while we're dying. And that's, if you believe in God and all of that, that's a sin. And, he might do well in this world, but maybe there is a God. And maybe... if there is a God, and I think it's a 50-50 chance, then he'll have to pay for those sins. And I certainly will not let up on criticizing him, even though I think personally he's probably not a bad person. He's doing bad things.